Las Vegas OPM.
I'm Noemi.
Cholo.
Carmelo.
And my name is Leo
Ako po si Tommy Shoes Morrison ng Las Vegas, Philippines by Tommy Shoes Morrison.
Hi everyone, this is Lana Misalucha and you are listening to PHLV Radio.
Vegas Pinoy. It's a bigger and a more exciting Filipino radio experience this 2019 on PHLV Radio. Here are your Kuya Sinates on PHLV Radio. Kuya Phil, Ate Me, Kuya Gilbert, Kuya Yo, Kuya Jay, and kasama sila
Esmeralda Padilla-Gold of Pisig Asia.
Attorney Flomi Javier Disa with Reeves Immigration Law.
Dr. Mary Faye Axon Armstrong from Pina of Nevada.
tayong lahat. Vegas Strong. It's a bigger and a more exciting Filipino radio experience this 2019. Only on your PHLV Radio.
The Asian American Pacific Islander Nurses Association of Nevada presents Healthy Mondays with Apina of Nevada. Start the week healthy and right with interesting conversations on living a healthy lifestyle. And now, your Healthy Mondays host, Dr. Mary Faye Axon Armstrong.
Aloha! Good evening. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. I'm yours truly, Dr. Mary Faye Axon Armstrong, founding president of the Asian American Pacific Islander Nurses Association of Nevada and professor at Roseman University of Health Sciences College of Nursing. Salamat po sa inyong pakikinig. Thank you for joining us tonight at your hapagkainan, your dining table. So last week, we talked about depression and suicide as we ask ourselves, how about the brokenhearted during the Valentine's Day, araw ng mga puso? So last week, we explored heart problems and mostly the emotional aspect. So tonight, we have Miss Courtney Farisi from Desert Springs to share with us heart problems at the structural level and our heart itself, the physical heart. What it does when it is overworked and can no longer repair itself. So welcome, Courtney, and thank you again for coming back.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so Courtney works at Desert Spring, and she is, are you clinical coordinator for?
I run the chest pain program for the hospital, which is what allows us to be able to accept heart attacks. People having a heart attack out in the community, they can come to us at any time, day or night, and we can fix it. And then I also run the heart failure program for the hospital. So we're accredited through Joint Commission for Heart Failure, and there's special things that go with those certifications, but really at the end of the day, it's just making sure that we're providing the best care possible to the patients.
And that's why I thought of you, because the National Institute of Health had identified Heart Month, February as the Heart Month. That's why I need to bring you back. I said, I need to bring Courtney back.
It's the time of year.
Yes, it's the time of the year. So maybe you can walk our listeners out there to talk about our heart, maybe our physical heart.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, any time you're thinking about anything with your body and how your body's working and what's working right and what's working wrong, it really, you just got to think about what everything does. And if you think about what your heart does, it's a muscle. So in the same way that you do push-ups and you get your arm muscles bigger, it's a muscle. And it's responsible for getting blood and oxygen and all of the extra nutrients and different things to your whole body. But without that heart pumping, you literally have nothing. So a lot of times, we eventually, when you get to that point when people do die, it's because the heart has stopped, but there might have been a bazillion things going on before that. It was just the last thing to be able that hung out and actually gave up. So with that, this starts from, when we're babies, sometimes babies will have issues and the heart isn't formed the right way or the muscle doesn't pump the right way. But then as we get older and we get past that, then it becomes the things that we do and the things that we have responsibility for. So the things that we eat and maybe other comorbidities, we call them. So other things that you have going on that can cause problems for your heart. And, a lot of those, before you ever get to a point to where you're one of my patients, to where you're having that heart attack or where you're already into heart failure, there's this damage has been happening. Generally speaking, it doesn't just happen with the click of your fingers. This is happening. It's building over time. A big thing in the research that's come out just over the last year or so, and it's been building also, but diabetes is an enormous risk factor for heart disease, and it is a major risk factor for it. So if you have diabetes, you are at a higher risk of having a cardiovascular event, and they're studying medications to make sure that, if they're on, is this the right medicine that somebody can be on to help manage the diabetes, but then also protect the heart? Because again, without that heart, we don't have anything. So if that pump doesn't work, then nothing else is working. The brain's not getting what it needs. Nothing's getting what it needs.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned about when we were babies, and then it clicked in my mind when they say, "Oh, I have a hole in my heart." Maybe you can expand on that when they say, "Oh, my doctor said I have a hole in my heart." What does that exactly mean?
Well, we all have a hole in our heart, technically. I mean, if you want to get technical, we all do. And usually what happens is after you're born and you start breathing on your own, you're not, using the oxygen that your mother is giving you through the, all the organs and everything that goes with being pregnant. You literally have a hole in your heart. And once you start breathing on your own, that hole closes. And as long as that hole closes, then that's fine. And it's just part of the muscle, and nothing is going wrong or anything like that. But the problem, and really with anything else in the heart, you have valves that open between little chambers, and it's kind of like its own little house. And you've got an upstairs and a downstairs, and you've got windows that go different places. And if at any point in time any of that isn't working right, then you're going to have problems. So that blood isn't moving in the direction that it's supposed to, or maybe it can't get out the way that it's supposed to because that muscle's maybe stiff or it's a little stretched out. Then that's when we have problems. And that's when, like I said, you become a patient of mine. And hopefully it doesn't get to that point. I would love to see everybody out in the community not having to come to the hospital. But if you do get in trouble, that's what we're there for, obviously.
And then I wanted to add also, when you still have the hole in your heart, they make the valves close, and if it's still not closed, so what happens is the unoxygenated and oxygenated blood gets all mixed up.
Yep, and you don't get enough of the oxygenated blood out.
Yes. And then you mentioned about diabetes. Yes. Those who have chronic diabetes, or those who have diabetes for a while and have uncontrolled blood sugar. 'Cause I have a story that I shared with my nursing students about hemoglobin A1c. I have this patient who comes in, and we have them record their blood sugar levels. They check their blood sugar at home, and it's pretty good. It's pretty normal until we have to check the hemoglobin A1c, which is a blood test that determines the average of blood sugar in the sugar in the blood. So what happens is when you have excess sugar, it attaches to the blood, and your red blood cells lifetime is 90 days, around 90 days, 3 months. And so the sugar gets stuck in that red blood cells. And so when they do the blood test, they can determine the average of the blood sugar. So I just thought I share that because you mentioned about diabetes as one of the risk factors for heart disease. And also the study shows for Asian Pacific Islanders, 3 of the top 3 chronic diseases that is prevalent to this population one is diabetes, and next one is cardiovascular disease, and the third one is asthma, because it's part of my study when I was in the PhD program, so kind of stuck in my mind. And the chronic illnesses. So because it's February, it's Heart Month, so maybe you can share with us more about what you do with heart failure patients and also patients that come in with chest pain.
So and I'm going to piggyback on, I'm going to go a little backwards before we go forwards here with the diabetes. And it's with any of this, diabetes, heart failure, any of this, the most important thing to know is where you're starting. And if you don't know where you're starting, then, you find out because you get in trouble, and then you're like, oh no, then this is really, really bad. So if you know where you're starting, and, that can just be an annual checkup with your regular doctor, and, and they can look at your cholesterol levels, they can look at your sugar levels. That A1C is a test. You don't even have to be fasting for it. It's a blood test that they do. And that's a great indicator, and that can tell us what's going on a more than daily basis. Because you check your sugar, you just poke your finger one time. That's one moment in time. When you check your sugar through the hemoglobin A1c, now you have basically 3 months worth of what your sugar looks like. So it's very important. Now, if you a big thing that we do is education on, what does a heart attack look like and what does that feel like? And honestly, it's a little different for everybody. I think we grew up seeing the commercials and it's a, middle-aged white male sweating, grabbing his chest, complaining of crushing chest pain, which not to say that that's not something that could happen, but that's not always the symptoms. And, the number one symptom for women specifically is fatigue. And I always laugh at that. And I think it's funny because I would love to see a woman that's not tired and isn't fatigued. But we are talking like cannot get out of bed. You are so just bone weary tired. So that's one of the symptoms for women. Another one, women, we don't necessarily get the chest pain, but we get maybe some back pain or shoulder pain, nausea, stomach upset. And a lot of times we just kind of brush it off to something else. I just ate something that didn't agree with me or, upset my stomach. But what I would encourage anybody is if you know that you've been going to the doctor and your cholesterol levels are a little bit elevated, or you're on cholesterol medication, your blood pressure has been elevated, you're taking medication for that. If you start to have some of those symptoms, that true heartburn feeling, that heartburn is a thing, and yes, it can be related to your stomach, but your stomach we can work around with. If you don't have your heart working right, then you need to go get it checked out. And I always encourage people, if you're having pain, any numbness or tingling that's like going up to your jaw, pain radiating down your left arm, you need to go get it checked out. And when you do go get it checked out, what they're going to look at, usually it's not at a primary care doctor. At that point, you're at least at an urgent care, if not an emergency department. If this is really bad chest pain and you can identify it as that, I recommend anybody call 911, get an ambulance there, because they can start from your living room, literally, if that's where you call the ambulance from. If they determine that you're having a heart attack based on the electricity that's going on in your heart, they are already getting a hold of the hospital. They're calling us. We're getting the cardiologist in. We're getting the cath lab team in, the nurses and the technicians and everybody that's going to help open up that blockage to get that heart working again. Because the quicker that we do that, the less damage that there is to the heart. And that's really the most important thing, because we can fix a lot of things, but once that muscle is damaged, now you're looking at a lot more of a recovery, and you're going to look at possibly limiting the quality of life that you have. And that's important too. It's nobody wants to not be able to do anything, just have to take bazillions of pills every day. You want to be able to live. You have to live your life. So with those symptoms, if you feel like you need to get it checked out, urgent cares are a great resource. We got a lot of them in town. There's, you can go in, again, you get the electricity checked in your heart. They can do some simple blood work to check to see if your heart's under stress. If it's nothing, you go home. If it's something, they send you onto the hospital, but that's always an option. And if you're sitting at home and you're not doing anything, then we don't know what's happening, so that's something that we just have to pay attention to.
Better safe than sorry. Yeah.
Especially with your heart, because without your heart, that's it. Nothing else works without that heart working.
Yes. Once the muscle is damaged, then it's permanent. And so when they do your, what we call EKG, they put in electrodes on your chest. And so if you had a heart attack before, it would show in the rhythm, because it's a permanent damage in your cardiac muscle. And you mentioned about indigestion, and I know you're an ER nurse, so you know that when someone comes in, I have a chest pain, they put in the electrodes and they do blood tests, and sometimes they also give you that what we call GI cocktail.
Yep.
Because sometimes it may be really it's an indigestion. And then in addition to that, speaking from experience, everything was negative, and then they do another test. It was my thyroid. And I was getting palpitations, and then there could be other, just like you said, it could be anything, but it's better safe than sorry, because it could save your life. So sometimes if your thyroid glands are producing too much thyroid hormones, then it gives your heart rate goes up, your metabolism goes up, and then also you get palpitation, and that could be the reason why you're having kind of symptoms with chest pain. So,
well, it can come from, there can be so many different things that make your heart race, or, make you feel like your heart's beating out of your chest. There's a lot of different things that can cause that. But again, if you're sitting at home and it's happening, we have no way to know what it is. You know, I mean, you can come in because you have an infection that's out of control, and you know, now your heart rate's through the roof, and you know, your blood pressure is going down. You don't feel well. We call it sepsis. But there's a lot of, you know, if you're sitting at home, you don't know. And so as long as you go get it checked out, and if it's nothing, you know, you have the GI cocktail, it helped with the heartburn, all your stuff came back okay, then you follow up with your doctor. And then it's no harm, no foul at all. But I used to check people in the front, and sometimes even people coming in by ambulance. Oh, I feel so stupid for coming in. It's probably nothing. And to be honest with you, I would rather see 1,000 of those than the person that I just thought it was nothing and I didn't come in. And now, you know, you're a patient whose heart just isn't pumping the way that it's supposed to because you've had damage that we can fix to a degree. The medicines are great. There's a lot of new technology. Cardiac rehab is a program after, you know, that you would go through. It's basically a rehab program for your heart. But again, that's a very different treatment plan than if we would have caught it early and fixed it, as opposed to letting it go and causing more damage.
So the message is, if you notice all the signs that it could be a heart attack, it's better safe than sorry before it's too late. You know, it's your life we're talking about.
Basically, heart failure, what that means, it's a big bucket that a lot of things fall into, but basically the heart's not pumping right. So that muscle either has gotten stretched out. So kind of think of like if you blow up a balloon and then you let the air out, it's not the same shape as what it was before, and it's not as strong as maybe what it was before you blew it up. So if that heart has gotten bigger, maybe because you've had, you know, high blood pressure that hasn't been treated, and that heart's having to work harder to squeeze blood throughout your body. Sometimes the heart gets stiff, and so it's still pumping, but that muscle isn't giving as good of a squeeze as it normally is. So again, it can't get blood to the rest of the body. And what happens with that is that, you know, the fluid and everything that you have going through your body, it starts to back up. And a lot of times, you know, you'll notice symptoms because it's not necessarily something that, again, happens right away. It happens over time. Maybe 20 years ago you had open heart surgery, and now you're starting to notice that you're getting tired doing things that you normally are able to do. You walk to your car in the morning, you walk out to maybe get your newspaper, and you're getting a little short of breath. Or you take your shoes and socks off at the end of the day, and you've got a band around your ankle where your socks are. But then when you wake up the next morning, it's still there. You still have an indentation there. Those are signs that you're starting to hang on to extra fluid. Another big one is that you don't sleep well. You know, normally maybe you sleep with 1 or 2 pillows, then it's 3 or 4 pillows, and then, you know, you're out on the couch, and not because you're in trouble and somebody kicked you out of bed, but because it's a lot easier for you to breathe. And what happens is, you know, as that heart is not able to get the blood and the oxygen and everything to the rest of the body, that fluid backs up. So you get swelling in your ankles and your feet. It can go up your legs. But you think about all this extra water, where it ends up is it ends up in your lungs. And that's when you really get in trouble, especially this time of year. It's cold and flu season, and you have fluid in your lungs, and you catch a little bit of a bug in there, and now it's turned into pneumonia. So now we still need to get the fluid off your lungs so you can breathe. We have to treat the infection, but at the same time, we got to get the extra fluid off of your body so that your heart's not working so hard. So there's a lot of things that can go into it if you get into what we call heart failure exacerbation, and that's really when you end up in the hospital. But the goal of any treatment plan is not that the hospital is part of your treatment plan. The hospital is always there. We are there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you need us, we're there. But if you're talking about these chronic diseases like diabetes and heart failure and things like that, the goal of these is to manage that outside of the hospital. Because if you have to come to the hospital, then something has gone very wrong. And like I said, it's okay. I mean, we don't want you sitting at home in trouble. If you can't breathe, you're having chest pain, of course, get into the hospital. But, these are, having conversations with your primary care doctors, seeing a cardiologist if you need it, seeing an endocrinologist if you need it, to get those primary things under control, like the diabetes, the high blood pressure, cholesterol, all of those things that can lead into bigger things, to get that under control. But once we've gotten to the point that we've developed into heart failure, there are specific medications for these patients. There's medications that help that heart, the muscle squeeze better. We give medications that help get fluid off of the body, so make you pee extra. That's the way we get the extra water off of you. And a huge part of that is what we eat. I mean, I feel like a huge part of any disease and how we treat it is what we eat. Mm-hmm. With diabetes, you got to watch your carbs and, what proteins you're doing with it and paying attention to that. But with heart failure, your number one enemy is salt. And I'm from Hawaii, and I know how I ate growing up, and I can tell you all of the. I mean, it was show you on everything, you know, and it. But all these
That culprit
these
soy
things,
sauce, aloha shoyu.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
But you just have to watch these things, and with salt, when you eat salt, your body's natural response is to hang on to more water to dilute it. Because if you're too salty, then literally it can make your brain go crazy. So we don't want that to happen. Your body has natural processes to make that not happen. So you hang on to extra water, but where maybe somebody, maybe you hang on to a little extra fluid, but it's gone the next day. Well, when you have heart failure, that little extra fluid can add up, and that's really where you get into trouble.
So where salt is, water follows.
Exactly.
So the key and the message is the prevention of exacerbation for those who have already been diagnosed with heart failure. So it's what we call literally drowning in their own fluids. So we don't want to wait until they're drowning in their own fluids before we do something. And Courtney, you mentioned about the pill, the water pill, so then you can drain some of the fluids in the lungs because the heart is not working well now, and so the lungs, the partner lungs, has to work harder, and so you have that extra fluids in there. And Courtney was talking about the swelling on the feet as well. So those are some of the signs and symptoms of the exacerbation of heart failure.
And one of the number one things, the easiest symptom to track, per se, and you might not even have symptoms yet, but I encourage everybody, get a bathroom scale. Put it in your bathroom, put it close, your arrangement, but wake up in the morning, go to the bathroom. Before you eat or drink anything, hop on that scale. So for me, I know that we get, programmed, you don't want the scale, don't weigh yourself.
I don't want to see it.
But you know what? There are good things that you can learn from the scale, and it keeps you accountable, at least it's normal to have fluctuations, but when you have any of these things, and if you know that, maybe you've had a heart attack prior and you're at a risk for, developing heart failure down the road, if you weigh yourself every day, that first thing in the morning, like I said, go to the bathroom, but then before you eat or drink anything, that's called your dry weight. Hop on that scale, and if you notice a big fluctuation, maybe you went out to eat and you had popcorn or something, and a little bit of a jump up, but after a few days, if that hasn't gone away and now you're adding on even more pounds, you're not going to put 5 pounds of fat weight on overnight or over the course of a few days, but you absolutely can put 5 pounds of water weight on. And if you notice that, and you see that in conjunction with getting tired, getting short of breath, the swelling, those are absolutely reasons that you need to get a hold of your doctor. You're not in trouble yet, but if you let it go too long, you will be. It breaks my heart when I have patients that, I gained 40 pounds in the last 2 weeks. That's not normal. Something is not working right. Mm-hmm. So if you're checking that on a daily basis and you know what your normal fluctuations are, then great. And if you get out of that range to where you were out of where you normally fluctuate to, then it's worth the phone call to let the doctor know what's going on and see if there's anything that maybe a medication needs to be adjusted, or, maybe something has changed now and, something's not working the way that it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm. So there it is. Check your fluid status, daily weights. Do you know that that's the exam for my students? They said, okay, what's the best indicator of fluid status for patients who have heart failure? Daily weights.
Daily weight,
yes.
The number one thing.
Yes.
You can tell a lot from that.
Yeah, so lots of information. Thank you again, Courtney, for coming back. I'm always going to tap to you when I hear heart or heart failure or chest pain. Oh, that's Courtney. So thank you so much for being here tonight. And also, again, PHLV Radio for giving us this platform to reach out to our community. We just gave you some information about watching out for chest pain, early signs of heart attack. Don't wait. If you think it is, maybe it's not, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Get some help, go to an emergency department or even urgent care. And for heart failure, there are heart failure programs out there. Do you want to give information about Desert Springs?
We have a ton of information on our website, mainly because I pushed to get a lot of it on there. But there's great resources. So you can always go to the website for the hospital. It's just desertspringshospital.com. American Heart Association, their website is www.heart.org. That's theirs. They have a lot of great information, and not just on heart failure, on other conditions and things like that. But there's plenty of opportunity. We do support groups once a month at the hospital through our cardiac rehab department. We do lunch and learns. Senior Advantage does a lot of different educational things. There's tons of things out there. If you want to get connected, just look for them, pay attention to them, and get involved. Come ask your questions, and reach out if you feel like you're struggling with anything, because there's always resources out there to help.
So there you go, mga kababayans and our listeners out there. So be heart healthy. And again, remember, every Monday is a healthy Monday. Aloha.
The Asian American Pacific Islander Nurses Association of Nevada has just brought you Healthy Mondays with Apina of Nevada.